the purpose of a gala or the purpose of an in-person gathering. It's not just to raise money. Of course it is, but it's to raise up the profile of the nonprofit. It's to get new donors and get people excited about the cause. And it's also to thank and honor the volunteers and staff and everyone who's been working so hard throughout the year with a night of just pure celebration.
Welcome to the Impact Roadmap, a podcast designed to give you the practical, concrete steps to grow your nonprofit or future-forward business in a sustainable way. I'm your host, Joey Goon. Let's get into the episode. Hey all, this episode is going to be one that you'll want to listen to. Today, I am honored to have Steve Johns, the CEO at OneCause, as a guest on the show. Steve's passionate about helping nonprofits build better tomorrows. And Steve, it's pretty remarkable, your background. You have 30 years of experience in tech, corporate development, venture capital, event production, and entrepreneurship. A lot of things to unpack there. And all of this knowledge, what I really appreciate in just sort of reading your book, this knowledge has just become a part of your character. And it's the essence that makes you such an interesting and impactful person and leader. And it's just become a flavor that's enhanced your work. And so, you're running OneCause, which is an award-winning fundraising platform that empowers nonprofits fundraising. And what's amazing about OneCause is if you run a nonprofit or you're involved in fundraising events of any kind, there's a very high likelihood that you know who OneCause is. And Steve, that speaks to how prolific your team is regarding content and brand awareness. And simply put, for OneCause, it's people can raise more money by using it. Funny enough, Steve, we produced 2 charity fundraisers this past weekend, and both of those organizations were nonprofits, of course, and OneCause clients, which I'm sure you appreciate.
I'm happy to hear that.
And when we work with OneCause as a production company, we breathe a sigh of relief because we're confident that the fundraising platform is just going to work. And then we can focus on the cause and not worry about whether the platform's going to work. And this allows our hosts to enjoy their event and to mingle with attendees opposed to putting out fires. And then last but not least, Steve, just a personal tidbit. I just want to start out by saying that I already love you and I barely know you. I spent the last week in your head. And this isn't some like pseudoscience, like craziness. For listeners out there, they're like, wait a second, what? He was in his head? I was reading your book, which is incredible. I've got my fearless shirt on.
Oh, nice. Nice.
My fearless book in hand here. And I just want to bring out the packaging because I've never received a book in as beautiful a package as this. I mean, there's like confetti strips on the inside. There's little notes from you, Steve, personal touches, and it just makes it that much more meaningful when you open something that has that much intention put into it. And to me, that's what makes reading so beautiful and interesting is you get to briefly escape your own thoughts and dive deep into the minds of others. And Steve, your book's been incredibly insightful and validating because we lead companies from a similar frame of mind and similar principles and beliefs and in parallel worlds. And you guys, I believe, you would identify as an SaaS or SaaS. And we're on the production side, but we're both delivering products and services to people producing events. And so I feel like you're a brother. And what it all comes back to is just falling in love with the work and making a difference through it. And I'm glad to see that you love what you do. And I'm so excited to explore all things Steve Johns, your backstory, your why, the lessons you've learned as the CEO of OneCause, meditation, yoga, stoicism, Marcus Aurelius, and of course your book. So let's dive into this, my friend Steve. And thank you so much for joining.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
For a nonprofit that's unfamiliar with OneCause, if I didn't do a good enough job at the beginning, can you just briefly explain what it is and why these types of platforms are necessary? And maybe just touch on how OneCause is different.
Yeah, no. Well, so first of all, I'll say you did a pretty darn good job. So I really appreciate that. But in terms of OneCause, we are a provider of software solutions and integrated payments for nonprofit fundraising. And we help nonprofits make fundraising easy and seamless for the donors and help nonprofits save time on the front end, setting up the fundraiser. And I'll say, a little bit about how we're different from that, because there's a number of people who provide that type of solution or that type of software. And I'd say that as you look at OneCause throughout, and you've mentioned it already, we truly care about our customers, and I hope that also comes through in the book. And when we put that book together, it wasn't about Steve Jobs and it wasn't about OneCause. It was about how OneCause, together with our customers, faced this incredible adversity and just rose up with resilience and continued to fundraise and continued to do everything that we possibly could do. It is really, truly in our DNA. I hope that came through in the book. It's really about how much we care about our customers. We do that by delivering great software, great services, integrated payments, but it's really about caring for those customers.
Stephen, and it comes through. We have, there's someone on our team, Jordy, shameless plug for Jordy. She's our communications director. She interfaces with all of our clients. And when they work with OneCause, she genuinely says, "Oh, thank goodness."
Yeah.
And she just, your staff's incredible and supportive. And like I was saying before we hit record, we've watched your journey for the last 9 years. And what we briefly talked about is, sometimes as leaders, we need to pat ourselves on the back and give ourselves a little bit of grace and pause and just realize that the journey's the destination. It's not about climbing the mountain. It's about appreciating and enjoying the journey and those little victories. And you all have had so many little victories over the last 9 years that you've been at the helm. So I just want to congratulate you, Steve, because it's pretty remarkable what you've accomplished. And I want to talk about that. What does it mean to be the CEO of OneCause? Can you take us through a day of what your life is like?
Sure. I guess what I'll start with is I'm a get-to guy. So when you ask me what's it like to be the CEO of OneCause, I get to be the CEO of OneCause. I am a get-to guy. And so I'm so proud of what we've been able to do. I'm so proud of what we've been able to build here. So thank you for saying that. A day in the life of Steve Jobs starts with coffee.
Cheers, my friend.
Exactly. Starts with coffee and a scan of the morning headlines and some emails. And then I do get on the mat. And I set my alarm, my iPhone alarm for 22 minutes and 3 seconds. And I do that every day. And I get mindfulness by listening to my daily calm app. I do stretching and I do some light workout. And I do that without fail. And I really stay true to that 22 minutes and 3 seconds. And that's kind of my bargain and my agreement with myself that says, get on the mat, spend the time, invest the time. You've got 22 minutes of a 24-hour day. But I also commit to, once that alarm goes off, I'm done. That's my promise to myself, and that's what gets me going. So I go into the office every day. We have tremendous flexibility here with our future of work plan, but I want to make sure that when I'm available, I'm in the office. I want people to know that we are people first, and my choice is to be in the office. And when my door is open, it is an invitation to come on in and knock on the door and say hello and share your day. And my days are filled with one-on-one team meetings and Zooms here's my best work, Joey, is from 5 to 7. Most everybody, if you came into the office, they've already gone home. I crank up the tunes and I get just a lot of focused work. And it's some of the best part of my day, from 5 to 7, just listening to my music.
I love it. You and I are so much alike. I sent you an email last night at, 9 or 10 o'clock when our daughter went to bed.
Yeah.
That's when my brain comes alive as well. And I do my best.
doubt.
That's awesome to hear that. Thank you, Steve, for sharing. I'm right there with you with the meditation and the yoga. I follow Travis Elliott. I don't know if you're familiar with him on YouTube, but if you're a yoga fanatic, you should check him out.
Okay.
I did a yoga with him this morning, and his quote was, "The best view comes from the hardest climb." And it's not the view outside of us, it's the view inside. But when you don't take space on the mat, you don't get to see the view. It's like,
gotta get on the mat.
That's so profound. Steve, you're a financial turn techie, turn live production and band manager. I would love to know, and the audience probably would too, is how did you get from the finance world to here? And what are some of the things that you learned along your journey that motivated you to change career paths in the way that you did?
So every new employee who joins OneCause gets a chance to meet me in a not in a one-on-one, but in a group setting. So everyone hears my story, and my story really started that financial advisory aspect of my career started with PricewaterhouseCoopers. It was my first job out of college. And what I was able to take away from that, and my big learning from that, was to not be afraid of anything. Once you can take and reduce a business down to the simple matter of cash in and cash out, you're not, so you're going to hear this theme of being fearless throughout. You're not afraid of doing anything. And so, I mean, I worked in industrial sewing machines and steel manufacturing, herbicides and pesticides. And I just learned that there's a lot of industries that will create all this jargon. I mean, talk about the music industry creating all this jargon to try and confuse you and to convince you that you don't know what you're doing. But once you can simplify everything to cash, which is what I was able to get in my first job, then that provided me with the fearlessness to go forward and really pursue really anything else. And I try and impart that on everybody who joins the company as well. I would say the biggest move for me was joining Gateway from PricewaterhouseCoopers. And that was in 1995. And I know I'm dating myself a little bit, but all you have to do is look at me to date me. That is my era. And so I joined Gateway in 1995. And this is when people were just getting on the internet. People were connecting with 28.8 modems, and we were bundling AOL internet access, and people were just discovering what it meant to get online and use a computer in the home. And so for me, that was like my love of technology. And then I began to fall in love with the intersection of technology and entertainment, because I got to work with a visionary like Ted Waite, he was really into music and he was really into entertainment. And so we started working on those types of projects. And I'd say that was really what set me on the path that led me here, was pursuing passion and pursuing technology. And yeah, the music stuff I added to my repertoire because I love music. I'm not a musician. I'm not talented at all, but I love it. And I was trying to figure out a way that I could bring my knowledge and understanding of technology and business together with music. And that's what took me down that path. So many twists and turns, all of them leading to where I am today. And as a result of that, is there anything I would change? Of course not, because I love where I'm sitting.
I just out of curiosity, by the way, I love your share. I mean, it's brilliant in that, but it doesn't matter what I think. This is not for me. This is for the audience. But selfishly, I think that share is brilliant. You learned and you acquired knowledge and wisdom from all these different companies that you worked for, and then that just became a flavor that you add into your work, and it enhanced your, it just made you more interesting as a person and a professional, which is awesome. Just out of curiosity, what bands did you manage? Like, what was your favorite show or event or band?
So I managed a band called Company of Thieves. They were an amazing band out of Chicago. I got them signed to Wind Up Records in late 2000s. They had a nice career, toured a little bit, of course, as bands do. They broke up, but it was a really great experience for me. I learned a lot. It taught me a lot about the music business. And, as they say, how do you make a small fortune in the music business? Start with a large one. So, that's
that's awesome.
I would say that there's an inverse proportion to fun and the ability to make a lot of money. So it was fun, but it wasn't necessarily something where I was going to make a lot of money. So it was just, I think you'd call it a side hustle these days. It was just something fun to do.
So Steve, I had a crisis of meaning in my life about 9 years ago. And I too, I'm a recovering finance person. And I was a wealth manager for a number of years. But kind of going back just a little bit further, at 9 years old, I started a lawn business. And I learned about entrepreneurship and managing employees and marketing and all the things that were required to run a successful business. But at that age, at 9 years old, I was just a kid pushing a lawnmower. I didn't know that I was learning principles that I'd use later in life. But I loved engines and being outside and talking to people. And then by age 18, I was investing in the stock market, and I thought financial planning offered me this confluence of my favorite things. It was like personal sovereignty and autonomy and flexibility and chart my own path forward and connect with and add value to people. But then I hit my first crossroads, and I had an existential crisis, which I have a book here, Existential Thoughts While in the Bathtub. And my mom was diagnosed with cancer. And shortly thereafter passed away. And we all know how that story ends, is I took over her legacy, which was Utopia experience. And I've learned a lot in the process of scaling a business. I think the most important lessons for me have been the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. There's beauty in vulnerability, and that everything takes way longer than we think it will. So don't focus on the end goal, focus on the journey. And then last but not least, discipline is a virtue. Although Ryan Holiday, a fellow Stoic, says discipline can also suck because then you guilt trip yourself when you don't do your meditation and your yoga and your exercise and your reading. But most importantly, I love the idea that we're only depressed when our full potential is not expressed. And I took a lot of these tidbits from your book as well. So I talked a little bit about my crossroad, and I'm curious, what are the crossroads that you faced in your life that have influenced you in the most meaningful way?
So once I really appreciate you asking this question, because the name of the book is Fearless: Leadership Lessons at the Crossroads. And so when we learned these leadership lessons, they were in the course of trying to keep fundraising during the global pandemic. But what I really hope, and would love your thoughts on that, I really hope when someone reads it, it's like, okay, so maybe these leadership lessons were learned during the course of a global pandemic, but these are leadership lessons that can be applied every day. We face crossroads every day, and it's simply just a decision point. It's should I stay or should I go? You got the Clash reference, I'm sure, right?
Yep. I grew up listening to that in my dad's car. We would jam together.
Nice. And so these crossroads we do face. And so I wrote the word down, this existential crisis, or this crisis. My crisis that I faced that's what brought me to OneCause at the time. So it was the summer of 2013. I was just hitting 50. My kids were going off to school. My kids were my why. They were the reason for my being. They were building better tomorrows for my kids was the reason that I got up in the morning and did all that I did. And now my kids were out of the house. They didn't need me any longer. They were successful. They were moving on. And I was trying to figure out, what am I doing with my life? Like, where am I? I was at this crossroads in my career and my life. And I was sitting on a beach and literally had this beach moment reading Wired magazine. Bill Clinton and Bill Gates were being interviewed, and they were talking about how they were using their wealth and power and influence in their first careers to do good in their next careers. And I literally put the magazine down, looked at my wife, and I said, that's it. That's what's missing. I don't have a purpose. I'm not doing anything with a mission. I'm not making positive impact. I had a great career going. I was taking care of my kids and my family, but I wasn't doing anything bigger than that. So that was that crossroads that I faced. Wow, I have to do something different. And so that was the summer of 2013. The opportunity to run OneCause, which was called BidPal at the time, came to me in the summer of 2014. And when you make a decision that, to look for something, then you're more attuned to it when it comes across your path. And so I had made that decision a year prior. This opportunity came my way. It was this intersection of technology, and we were doing actually event production. And then there was this added element of doing good. And this is what I had to do. This was the crossroads that I faced. That was the choice that I had to make. And so, I told you before, I had made some other career decisions, leaving PwC to join Gateway. That was probably my biggest decision at that time. I mean, Gateway was in North Sioux City, South Dakota. I was uprooting my family from the suburbs of Chicago. There was plenty of people who said, "What are you doing, Steve? You are crazy." But that really was one of the most impactful decisions of my life that really turned out well. And that next big decision was 2014 when I joined OneCause. And again, that is a big decision. And again, I get to sit here today, and I'm so excited that I was able to do that. I do want to add, though, this: those are big crossroads. We face little crossroads, sometimes randomly. I love kind of looking at all of the collection of decisions that we make every day that lead to outcomes. Like, I met my wife in college. Well, if I hadn't have gone to that party that night, would I have ever met my wife of 35 plus years? And so it was a small decision to make at that point in time, but it ended up having a giant impact on the rest of my life. So it's not just big decisions, it's also the small decisions.
Small decisions lead to big wins.
You bet.
That's awesome. So let's go back to when you first joined OneCause. 5 or 6 years after. So you joined in 2014, correct?
Yes.
And 5 or 6 years after that, boom, pandemic.
Boom.
And there's so many parallels, Steve. Two people running companies that offer products and services around events, and the world shut down. And you all were like kind of figuring out, like, the world is shutting down. What are we going to do? What's going through your head in those first couple of days, knowing that everything that you had built was potentially in jeopardy now? What are you feeling, and what was this experience like for you?
So in the book, we use this reference. I don't know if we use the word Titanic, but like the captain of the ship of the Titanic. And the first move is to make sure everyone's got their life jackets on, make sure everyone is heading to the lifeboat, making sure that everyone is safe first, staying calm and not panicking. And then we're going to figure out how to stay alive first. And then we're going to figure out how are we going to stay warm, how are we going to stay dry, fed and hydrated. But the first thing you have to do is survive and put your mask on first. We talked about that a lot, and just taking care of the company and the business. Okay. Now we've done that. Now we need to focus externally. And we literally reached out to every single one of our customers who had an event. And to your point, March 14th, Saturday, we had maybe 200 events scheduled that weekend, 0. March 21st, we had 200 events scheduled for that weekend. Everything went to 0 in an instant. So what do you do? And so we went to work, rescheduling, converting from in-person to virtual, online, peer-to-peer, however we could help people continue to fundraise. And so that it was just imperative for OneCause to really rally together with strength to go out and take care of our customers. But I'll also share this with you. And maybe I was naive. I never allowed myself the thought that we potentially couldn't survive this. Of course, it was a possibility. But as I look back, I never think of myself, or I never picture myself wringing my hands or sitting in contemplation saying, how are we going to do this? We might not. I don't think that I ever allowed myself to do that. I knew that there was a way that we were going to be able to figure it out. I didn't know what that was. And again, I think that that's what came through in my weekly updates, what resulted in the book is it's like, hey, I don't know how we're going to do this. No one can say from experience. In my experience, this is how we managed through the last global pandemic. There wasn't a playbook for it, as we all said, but we figured it out. And I think, again, I never allowed myself to ever consider that failure was going to be a possibility.
And I really appreciated your innovation. I think a lot of people did. And just to touch, because a moment ago at the beginning of the podcast, we talked about how prolific and on the ball your team is and you are in getting information out there. Can I just share a quick story with you about that? So we, like you, had to evolve. And as terrible as the pandemic was for humanity, we saw the silver lining, and it was a catalyst for exponential growth for us. And at the time, we had 270 clients, corporate and nonprofit, but we doubled down on trying to figure this out for our nonprofit partners like you all did. Because they needed the money to fuel their missions. And so necessity, as they say, is the mother of invention and innovation. And we had a client whose gala was slated for March 19th, 2020, and the world locked down on March 15th. So we had 4 days to prepare ourselves for a virtual gala. And thankfully, we had a dynamic team, and we have backgrounds in broadcasting and media. So we were able to quickly pivot and help take this client's event online. And the results were pretty remarkable. And you'll be glad to know they used OneCause.
Nice. And
it was a 2-hour event in Chicago, and they raised more money than they had in the previous year at their in-person gathering. So we said, hold up, wait a second. There might be something here. Mm-hmm. We need to do everything in our power to get this information out to nonprofits all over the country that are dealing with this right now. So what did we do? We reached out to our friend, Kelly Velasquez-Haig, and we said, hey, let's do a virtual webinar. And not to my surprise, Kelly said, dude, we're already planning one. Do you guys want to come on and co-star this thing with us? And so that webinar created a library of content that we could then share with clients and prospects and get that information out there. And it was not surprising to us at all that OneCause was on the front line and you were leading the charge, you were pioneering. And so that comes with curiosity and a how can we attitude that you've instilled in the organization, and leaning into adversity and becoming better and stronger because of it. And that's everything that your book talks about. So can you talk a little bit more about your relationship with overcoming adversity and your can-do, how might we attitude, And maybe we can tie it into the Lotus plant's journey and how that's become a metaphor for how you lead your company and embrace change and see change as a gift.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So if you look at the book that Joey held up, there's a picture of a beautiful lotus on the front. But the story that I heard as I was sitting on the mat, maybe 3 or 4 weeks into the pandemic, was a story about how that lotus began. And that began as a bud underneath the mud and the muck and the mire of the pond. And the journey that bud took through the mud, through the pond, and then popping up above the pond to emerge as this beautiful lotus flower. And so when I heard that, and it's an old Buddhist story illustration, and when I heard that, I said, this is the story that OneCause has to hear, because right now we're the bud and we're in the mud. But we have to give the inspiration and the vision for someday becoming and emerging as that beautiful lotus flower someday. And so that became, I would say, maybe my first illustration that I used for inspiration for my weekly updates. And it was a way to say, here's some inspiration that we got from another source, and let's see ourselves in that. And I said, that's it. What we need to do is rally around that and really see ourselves. And again, we were the bud in the mud. We were not that lotus flower. But as we I moved our way in, and Joey, to your point, we spun up what we called, I think, the COVID-19 Resource Center. And that was available for everyone. That wasn't just available for our customers. That was available for the general populace of nonprofits to go and access resources that we were using. And so we took action. And the other thing that I would say is, there was no playbook, but I would say that we followed, FEMA does have some guidance and some guidelines for emergency response. And that is response, recovery, mitigation, and preparedness. And we were in response for 6 months. We moved into recovery, and our new OneCause fundraising platform is probably the best example of preparedness that you can come up with, because now we have built this new platform that if there, is an event, again, where you need to go virtual, we're ready with that. If you want to go hybrid and you see the value of a combination of virtual and in person, and you see the reach of that, you can use the new platform for hybrid. And then, of course, 2023 is the year of in person. We were hoping it would be 2022, and it came towards the end of the year. But I don't think you and I will forget that January and February of 2022 were still marked by COVID. In fact, the Omicron variant peaked in the middle of January in 2022 in the United States. So there was still some of that overhang that was impacting nonprofit fundraising decision-making early in 2022 that really delayed some of the actions. And so, yeah, we focused on taking action. We focused on emergency response, but also knowing that it was going to take a while for us to be in that. We were going to be in that mud for a while. And I really, truly believe that towards the end of 22 and into 2023, we can finally say that we're emerging as that beautiful lotus flower.
It's really a beautiful metaphor.
It is.
You mentioned that 2023 is the year for in-person events, and not surprisingly, your favorite chapter in your book, from what I heard on your Raise Nation podcast, your podcast episode with Don Lego, is that your favorite chapter is connection.
It is.
And so let's talk about that. Like, COVID was the great reset. And so we always help our clients, and we want to help them think differently about events, because you don't want to fall back into the same formulaic program heavy fundraiser or gala. That, like, for us, that would be insane.
Right.
Just like COVID, we have to iterate and think about things differently in new ways to create community and bring mission moments into experiences instead of just a rubber chicken dinner and then send people out the door. And so you talk a bit in your book about, your podcast episode on how, you talk a little bit in your book and in your podcast episode with Dawn on the Raise Nation podcast about how we are physiologically meant to be in groups. And at Utopia, we talk about the 3 C's. And I'm not going to unpack them now, but it's really a framework that we use to help people understand why people come together. And the biggest reason why people come to any event of any kind is the 3rd C, which comes back to what you share. It's communal capital. It's connection. And people want to be with other people who have similar aspirations and life goals, and they want to be part of something meaningful. And so as people who both run companies that bring people together through events, let's spend a little bit of time talking about events and creating community. Just through your background and through your community at OneCause, maybe from your past experiences in running a band and being a part of all different types of events, what are some things that you've seen successful organizations doing through events that have helped them raise more money and create more connection?
Yeah, so let me just start with maybe my thoughts on connection, because it truly is my favorite chapter in the book. It's chapter 15, and I call it Connect. And in connection, I'm talking about the human connection, and the first focus is family. And so I talk about my family, and I'd kind of relay a trip that we took out to the West, and how we kind of traveled together. We hadn't traveled together in a while. My kids are adult kids, but they came with, and it was that fun, that connection again of family. And then I talk about the extended family between myself and everyone at OneCause and the customers that we serve. The next element of connection that I talk about in the book is friendship. And I think, these connections were lost with COVID. And I think that we're still feeling the negative impacts of them. I still think that we have a mental health crisis that we're going to be dealing with, I think, for a long time, of people who went into isolation or people who lost that connection. In fact, my 88-year-old dad is in the memory care. He has dementia. And when he was shut off and cut off from human connection, he deteriorated quite rapidly in terms of his development. And so, and there's scientific research, as you just mentioned, that there's a physiological connection between health and well-being and human connection. And so it's so important. So again, a big part of what I mentioned in the book is also like celebrate life, and let's take the moment. And so those, I think, who are successful in galas and fundraisers and bringing people together is making it more than just raising money. Of course, our software, we want to help you raise more money, but we also want to help you connect with more donors and connect with people. And so I think that, as fundraisers look at the purpose of a gala or the purpose of an in-person gathering, it's not just to raise money. Of course it is, but it's to raise up the profile of the nonprofit. It's to get new donors and get people excited about the cause. And it's also to thank and honor the volunteers and staff and everyone who's been working so hard throughout the year with a night of just pure celebration and of what the nonprofit has been able to accomplish throughout the year. So again, I think that of course we need to focus on physical safety. Of course we need to focus on keeping everyone healthy, but it's really about celebration and honor and recognition and really telling the story about the cause and getting more people to care about that cause and growing that base. I just want to share share one story. Right before the pandemic in 2019, I attended 2 pre-gala fundraising dinners, and the fundraising chairs for each of those galas, it was so crazy. That year said, 5 years ago, I had never heard of this organization. I had never heard of this cause. I was invited as a guest to the gala, and I fell in love. I couldn't believe the commitment and the energy that everyone had around this cause. I committed myself to that cause. And now 5 years later, I am the fundraising chair for this gala, having never, ever been associated with this cause in the past 2 times. And I think that's the power of connection.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. Steve, nonprofits too are inherently expected to do more with less. Like that sometimes comes with a scarcity mindset, sure, because there's this feeling or this belief that there's just not enough money out there and we need to conserve every dollar so it goes towards the mission and pays our staff. And unfortunately, that means missed opportunities when it comes to investing in videos, and all nonprofits should be tripling down on videos. I mean, just from this podcast episode alone, Steve, we'll have 40 pieces of short Okay, maybe I'm embellishing. We'll have 10, 15, 20 pieces of short form content that we can write blogs around, do PR initiatives around, put on YouTube, put on Instagram, put on TikTok, et cetera, to try and bring people to, to this episode and to this content. And so I just think everyone should triple down on videos and invest in software solutions like OneCause that make their lives easier. That could actually lead to more donations, right? But in your book, you do a wonderful job of unpacking this abundance mindset. Can you talk a little bit more about your abundance mindset and how it's fueled your growth, and how do we shift from scarcity to abundance?
Yeah, and again, just for definitional sake, the notion of having an abundance mindset versus a scarcity mindset is if your friend has experienced some level of success, you look at that and say, that's fantastic. There's plenty of success to go around, and that's the abundance mindset. And the scarcity mindset says, oh, shoot, there's less now. My friend has success, and there's less for me, and there's a limited amount to go around. So, of course, as you listen to that, you think it's absurd that anyone would think from a scarcity mindset. But of course, we do. It's part of human nature, and so this abundance mindset really, again, kind of moves OneCause in a way. You talk about a nonprofit making an investment in technology. So let's say that you spend $2,000 or $3,000 on an annual subscription. We at OneCause are literally spending millions of dollars every year making our product better to serve nonprofits. And so we're doing that so they don't have to. And so we exist and as a commercial entity, and we can afford to make those long-term investments. And so what we want to say is we want to be here forever. We want to be here for as long as you need us. And so what we're doing is we're making investments and delivering that and innovating in that next generation of technology. So you don't have to. Imagine if nonprofits had to build their own software, if they had to build their own fundraising software. And so we're out there spending millions of dollars innovating and building new software so that we can sell that to nonprofits for a reasonable price. And then to your point, hope that from a return on investment standpoint, they see multiples of that investment in terms of being able to raise more money, connect with more donors, and have that be something that they can look back and go to their board and say, that was sufficient return on investment to come back next year and continue to use OneCause. That's what we're all about. And that's what we're about, investing in the future and continuing to innovate.
As you continue to innovate and grow, Steve, I'm curious about challenges of scaling. Like, have there been levels along the way that were just more difficult for you to navigate as you grew? And was there a moment where you're like, sheesh, this is getting crazy? And like, were you wrestling with the challenge of staying true to your core philosophies and principles as you've grown this company?
So first of all, I am so blessed and so fortunate to have an amazing team. And you've already mentioned the team and really focused on the marketing team. But my technology and product and sales and marketing teams have really helped this business to scale. And I would say that of course we face the same scaling problems that every company faces in the SaaS world, but we use technology ourselves to scale, and we hire the best and brightest, thankfully, fortunately, smarter than me, who really know a lot about the respective areas, and we're able to scale. Now, again, I would say that yes, over time, to the second part of your question, over time, we've looked and said, well, was that original set of values what it takes to continue to be a one-causer these days? And so I would say that in my almost 9-year tenure here, we did change our values about 4 or 5 years ago because we were becoming a different company. And it took a different set of values to be successful in the new OneCause than it did maybe in the early days when we were really scrappy and we were really trying to, kind of just survive and get through some of those tough times. And so as I look at our values today, we are passionate, we are curious, we are helpful, and we are committed. And also the book goes into those in greater detail. I think about those values, and that's the way that I want to live my life. That's the way that I want OneCausers to live their lives every day. And I think those values we established back in 2019, and they remain true today. Maybe we're thinking about fearless. I mean, I'd love to say we are fearless because, again, in writing fearless and talking about what it means to be fearless, I think that's a great way to live your life as well. I think that you should be passionate, curious, helpful, and committed. And I want everyone to be fearless as well.
And our audience is fearless, and and our audience members are, CEOs and executive directors that are in development directors that are running companies and producing large events, and they're making an impact. The Impact Roadmap podcast is all about highlighting the stories of entrepreneurs on the planet that are making the planet a better place to be and to live, and using business as a force for good. And so they are fearless. But I think sometimes we get, you and I talked about this before we hit record, is we get so stuck in the doing that we forget to just take time and press pause and do a reset and get on the mat. And so I know you're very into meditation and stoicism. By the way, I love the Calm app and Tamara Levitt. I also love Sam Harris, who's incredibly bright. But let's talk more about the importance of these two things in your life. And just real quick, for anyone who's unfamiliar with stoicism, it's basically a philosophy of how we don't control what happens. We only control how we respond. It's like Ryan Holiday says it's an operating system for how to be a good person and to survive shitty situations. So let's talk more about the importance of stoicism and mindfulness in your life and how it's molded you into the person and the servant leader that you are.
Yeah, I would say that notion of stoicism, I call it the secret to life. And I wish I would have learned it earlier in my life. And again, it's really my favorite lesson from the Stoics. If we can just focus on the things that we can control, which is how we react next, what we do next, and not get bogged down by the things that we can't control, like COVID. That really is a formula for really being able to move forward without fear, and really being in control of what we do and what do we do next. And I think that's another thing the Stoics talked about, is living life and doing things in the right way and making decisions that are doing the right thing. And so what's also remarkable about the Stoics is, well, particularly Marcus Aurelius, but again, he kind of scribed and wrote down, even thoughts of others like Seneca and Epictetus before him. This was over 2,000 years ago. And that's what I love about picking up meditations, is I can pick up meditations. I could kind of go in the middle of the book and start reading and learn something and be able to take something that was written 2,000 years ago is so applicable today because it's common sense, and it is just about doing the right thing.
I actually, in reading your book and listening to your Raise a Nation podcast episode with Dawn, I went on and ordered meditations. I can't wait to read it sitting here on the floor. I
thank you for doing so. And you probably heard me say, and I challenged my company. I said, it's the best $10 that you can spend on Amazon. If you spend it and you are disappointed, I guarantee you I will refund your money. No one.
I'm sure I will not be disappointed. Marcus Aurelius, just to be inside his mind, I'm sure that's a fascinating read. So, right. Steve, just one more question for you, and then we can go into the rapid fire round.
Okay.
Which is rapid fire for us is just questions that we ask every single person on our podcast, every guest, just to get to know them more deeply. And I think we've already done a pretty good job of that. Like we went deep quick. Just curious, what are you focused on and what are you most excited about? Like life in general, the future of OneCause, fundraising, or perhaps more specifically, like bringing people together for great causes. Like what are you most focused on and excited about right now in life?
Yeah, so I would say what I'm most focused on right now, I mentioned it earlier, is 2023. I really think that this is the first true year back from the pandemic for in-person fundraising. We're starting to see it in January. We started to see it in February. We're really starting to see it in March. The first weekend in March, that March 4th, was a record weekend for us. There were more events in that weekend than ever before in the history of the company. I think in 2022, there was that kind of a little bit of remnant in February or January and February, and still maybe a little hesitation getting back full on in person. And listen, I know that the pandemic isn't over. I'm not being disrespectful in that way, because 2 weeks ago, I mentioned my 88-year-old dad. He got COVID 2 weeks ago. He lives in a memory care floor of a assisted living home, and COVID still found him there. And, for a while there, I didn't know if he was actually going to make it. He had to be taken by an ambulance to the hospital on an emergency basis. That was just 2 weeks ago. So COVID is still here, but I think it's 2023 is the year where people are really going to move forward. We're going to see generosity continue to flow. I know that we're being impacted by inflation. I know that we're being impacted by rising interest rates. I know that there's a fear of the coming recession in 2023, but we still have not seen a decline or any even kind of flattening out of generosity. We still see generosity continuing to flow and record levels of donations and giving coming into the events that we're supporting. So, man, that's what I'm focused on. That's what I'm excited about. 2023 is going to be bigger than ever and better than ever.
Thank you for sharing that, Steve.
Yeah.
Just want to take 30 seconds and thank the sponsor of this episode, Utopia Experience. When looking for an event and video production company, many businesses just want easy AV at an affordable price, and they overlook the most important part of producing an event and telling stories, which is building community. An ode to you, Steve. All event and video production companies have similar technology, but not all companies have the Utopia edge. You'll likely agree that attendee expectations are at an all-time high. In this experience economy, every form of communication and every interaction has to have uniqueness and personalization. That's where Utopia comes in. The greatest value Utopia brings to clients is that they're fueled by curiosity, passion, and desire to innovate. Most importantly, everything they do is aimed at scaling connection and uniting hearts. And that means taking an otherwise transient and impermanent experience and making it transformational so it can live infinitely across time, transcending the four walls of your venue forever. Through unforgettable event experiences and thoughtful video storytelling, Utopia Experience's mission is to help those that help the world. So, final questions for you, my friend.
Sounds good. Well, Joey, your mission is so similar to ours. That was fantastic. I loved hearing that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Favorite book, movie, or podcast show? So
I will choose book, and I will go with meditations. And I'll give you also a quick reason why is because I've called myself the accidental author because I didn't start out writing a book. I just started out writing these weekly updates. And I think if Marcus was sitting here with us on this podcast, he would call himself the same. I didn't set out to write a book. I just set out to journal. And that journal and that journaling became a book. And so that's also inspirational to me. It's almost been 3 years to the month that you wrote your first letter on April 2nd, 2020. I know. I thought about that today when I saw the date. Kind of crazy. And your letter was amazing. You started out and you said, "How are you?" Like really, not just how are you on the surface level where if somebody unpacks their crap, like when you meet someone at Starbucks and you're like, "Hey, how are you?" You're not supposed to actually divulge how you're actually feeling. But you asked, "How are you?" Like really tell me how you're doing. And that's awesome. Not many CEOs and leaders show that type of vulnerability and compassion. I appreciate that. I'm getting choked up just thinking about it. Yeah, you're pretty awesome, Steve. Seriously, I mean that from a genuine place of like getting to know you through this book. You're an awesome leader. Thank you. What matters to you most in life? Taking care of my family. Let's see. So like I said, it's been nearly 3 years to the month that you sent that first email. Yep. We've made it. We're on the other side. Well, hopefully, there could be additional pandemics, but it's been 3 years. What is something like right now? This can be about yourself, your personal and professional accomplishments, your team, your partners, your community, your network, something that you just want to brag about right now with no judgment. Okay, so I'm going to have to go back to our COVID story, and I thank you also for providing your background and your insight from an outsider, third party perspective. What we did was remarkable, and what we did was motivated by just wanting to help people, and so the motivations were pure. And again, so here we are today. We survived that, and in 2022. We helped to raise over $1 billion for our nonprofit customers on OneCause on our platform. Wow. And I'm telling you, the world is a better place because we're in it. And I'm unashamed, and it's unabashed bragging. Wow. That's incredible. Kudos to you. Kudos to all of you. Who is someone that inspires you that you think we should have on this podcast? Marcus Aurelius. Yeah, exactly. Well, we definitely could do that. Okay, so what I would say is this woman has been a guest speaker at Raise for the past 2 years. Her name is Shauna Adamick. She is the executive director of the Cerner Charitable Foundation. She has a story of overcoming personal health setbacks, and also a story of doing tremendous good running the foundation. Again, she has been a keynote speaker at the last 2 raises, and if there is an inspirational story to be told, to be shared, Shauna has it, and she's an incredible person.
Amazing. Well, Shauna, there you go.
Yeah.
Shameless plug for you and the incredible work that you're doing. We'll be reaching out to you. Steve, last words of wisdom. Anything that we didn't talk about that you want to share?
Well, this is not necessarily words of wisdom, but I'm going to continue bragging. About 2 weeks ago, I was the lucky recipient of a granddaughter. My daughter had, thank you. My daughter had a baby. And I would say that we've talked a lot about Crossroads, and we've talked a lot about decision making. We talked a lot about things. And today, I wanted to really talk about perspective. And so I have been a dad. I have been a husband for my life. And now I get a chance to be a grandfather or a grandpa. And it provides this different perspective in your life. And so I am maybe entering that next phase where my Y is 8 weeks old. She's amazing. Her name is Tallulah. And it is all those things that are said about being a grandparent are true. I am completely in love, and she is amazing. So I didn't really want to necessarily go down any other path other than say that there is new happiness in the life and a new reason and a new why.
That's amazing. Yeah. And by the way, I didn't mention this earlier because we just continued on the, with the questions and whatnot and wanted to be mindful of time. But I just wanted to say that I really empathize with what you're going through with your dad.
Thank you.
That's tough.
It's very tough. It's very tough.
Really tough. Well, hey, friends. It's Steve. It's been an absolute honor and a pleasure. Steve's book is out now. Go grab my CEO friends and executive directors, anyone leading a company, anyone who has a family member that you care about and that you love. Go buy 1 or 1 million copies of Steve's book on Fearless. Give it to your entire company. You won't be disappointed. Similar to how you say you won't be disappointed if you spend the $10 on meditations. If you buy this book and you don't love it, I'll reimburse you.
Whoa, there we go.
It's an incredible story. Every single person out there who is a leader should be reading this book. So Steve, thank you so much for putting the words down on paper and sharing that with the world. Really meaningful. And thank you for just showing up and being the most authentic and caring and vulnerable and empathetic version of yourself. Not just for your community at OneCause, but for all of us here on the planet. You're making the planet a better place to be. And I'm just honored to know you.
Thanks, Joey. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Hey, if this episode was valuable to you, then share it with someone that you love, someone that you know that could benefit from it. Also, be sure to subscribe, and depending on how you're listening, go ahead and leave a comment or review. This will help ensure that we are connecting with other nonprofit leaders so that we can get this critical information out to them. And if your company is in the early or even late stages of putting on an event, go to our website, utopiaexperience.com, and click the Book Us tab and schedule a free discovery call to see if our services would be a right fit for your event. And even if they're not, that's okay. I promise you our expertise can steer you in the right direction, so you'll get value either way. Thanks for listening to the Impact Roadmap, and we'll see you next time.